Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about this kind of central axis radio paths that happens within an octave, and we prepare a little bit um, audio from Bashar, where he review another component within the cons, and we're going to link this component and figure it out how this can be used to create actually a circuit. Those circuits they called fires also, um, and we will see how eventually this is possible, one thing to lead to another. So the copper spikes that Bashar talked about, he mentioned them only in one session. This session is called the Great Pyramid, at the Great Pyramid, and I would like to run the recording now so you can see.
The other day you were speaking with the Japanese,
Yes.
and you talked about a device with a coiled wire.
Yes, the double cone spiral wire,
Exactly.
yes.
I was wondering if you might elaborate on that, particularly how one might get useful, maybe electricity out of it.
The only elaboration that we can make at this time, until you actually perform what we have already said, and then we can go to the next step, is as follows. Again, start with heavy gauge insulated wire, start with a diameter approximately so, and start coiling up into a cone. Go up to a point where it is about this diameter, and then spread it out into the same diameter as the bottom and start going downward so that the two cones intersect each other. And when you get back to the bottom, connect it to the first spiral at the bottom. This must be at least the size of a device that would fit comfortably within a tetrahedron that is 3 feet tall from base to apex. That is the minimum size necessary to get some flow out of this device. Now what you're going to add to it in each of the cones is a copper spike that goes from the central diameter where the two cones intersect out to a point approximately at the place where the two cones begin. These will be the antenna that will direct the flow of etheric energy. But this is not really electronics. This is not really electricity. This is the first device in the new science on your planet of etherics. But it can be converted into the idea of electric flow if you wish. But you must begin by creating such a device first and experimenting with it a little bit before we will go on from there. All right?
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
So Bashar suggests to add a spike or a copper rod, conductive rod, and this is basically the idea of the central axis. In other sessions, Bashar called this central axis time axis, because you will see why actually it's called time axis in a second, but also in the chemical manual, they explore this central axis, they call it the central axis X, and basically this is a kind of short description. They say that the axes are integral to opposite fields. So when we're talking about space-time antennas, space-time fields, they are like equal in strength and opposite in directions, and they kind of serve like a barrier to each other. They always stand side by side, but they can never mix. Imagine you have oil and water, and you shake the bottle, and then many small cavities begin to form inside. So the oil have one kind of density, the water have different density. They cannot really mix. So in this kind of idea, maybe it's one of the analogy we can use to understand how those space and time fields actually create something like a checkerboard, something like a field that it's like in alternating predominance, like a checkerboard, positive, negative, with one part of that fields being more space field predominant or with higher frequency, high speed, and the other one time field predominant with lower speed and lower frequency. So they say axes are integral to opposite fields. Axes develop within an energy sphere regardless of the size and the system. This energy sphere can be like the universe, or can be in a Planck scale. It doesn't matter. Always those axes, they develop within any kind of energy sphere. Or when they say octave, they mean group of resonance speeds, or energy sphere, let's say it simply. Those axes locate relative to the overlaying fields as a whole, the travel within those fields and alignment of the fulcrum of the spherical groupings. They constitute an agreement between equal and opposite halves of the whole. Axes are not imaginary, but actually present as highways of energy travel. So they're talking about this kind of axis like one-dimensional, that they have length, don't have width, don't have depth, but they have length. And they are like a fulcrum points where the opposite energy, opposite fields finding balance, finding agreement, and they are usually passing through the center of this kind of spherical energies or toroidal fields. So this image on the left is the space torus. In the alchemical manual, if you scroll it to the last page, you will see this space torus. Basically, this space torus is the key. It's like a permission slip to understand all mechanical or all electrical activities, all forces, anything that is moving. Everything is actually constantly moving, but to understand motion, electrical or mechanical, they say that only with the space torus we can understand all the motion and all the forces. When we have an electrical signal that is moving, it's moving with a constant speed, so the speed is not changing, the rate of travel is not changing, but the frequency is changing, the timing can be different. And when we have mechanical motion, there we have different speeds and so on. But the main idea is that this space torus, you see the black arrow here, it's pointing the direction of the time field or the potential energy. It's in this case it's upward, and we can see that through the right hand rule. When you point this axis with your thumb of the right hand, your fingers will show also, it will create rotation counterclockwise again from time field, and equal and opposite to that, the white arrows are showing the space field or the kinetic energy, moving in always equal and opposite direction. So basically there are three components. There is a central axis, which is showing the motion either of the signal or the mass or the body that is traveling. And when something is traveling, it's create a kind of reactance from the fields through which it's travel, and this actually interaction create this rotation. And this rotation you can see here from the Ampere's law. It's showing that when the current is moving in that direction, when you put your right hand, the thumb, the fingers are showing where is the north, the magnetic field, the north pole, how it's traveling counterclockwise. So when the North Pole is traveling counterclockwise in this direction, again you can use your right hand to point the north part, and you will see that they will develop a concentric rings, that they will be in that direction. They will follow the central axis, and they will rotate in that direction. So basically the motion provoke the fields to rotate in that direction, and also provoke them to rotate, and this create kind of toroidal fields. The most important thing to understand is that these toroidal fields, they are not traveling with the object or with the signal. They are created in instances and they replicate in a sense, but they're not traveling with the object. They are created many times instantaneously. So I'm saying this because this central axis is basically the main characteristic of the space torus. It's always happening. It's showing where the object or the signal is going, and here is the cross section. You can see within the magnet, within the magnet, there is atoms inside. The atomic spin of the bar magnet they are oscillating, and they're acting like propellers, pushing the time field from the North Pole, from the north side. And when this time field is pushed from the north side, they have the ability to recognize their own beginnings and create something that is called closure, and create this kind of circuit loops and begin to circle. In that way, and this creates perpendicular, again following the right hand rule, is create in the equatorial plane a rotation around the bar magnet. So basically the space torus have a circuit loops that moving axially, and it have also, they call it meridian plates, that move tangentially or radially in the perpendicular direction, and this create what we call the space torus. Maybe it's not so clear from these images for those of you who didn't explore the chemical manual, but let's begin a little bit backward. So in the chemical manual they explain that the existence, or all that is, it's infinite, and there is no beginning, there is no end, but it is so big there is nothing outside of existence, because non-existence does not exist by definition, it's only existence, and that's why it can occupy all the space. So there is nothing beyond existence, and the only way the existence can create anything if it's dividing itself into a smaller and smaller parts, to create only within itself. And to create within itself, you need to divide itself into smaller and smaller parts. And the first division is the existence divide itself in the point of contraction, which it's subject to closure, the energy moving towards the center, and it's building, it's storing the potential there. And the more potential it's stored at this point, the equal and opposite space field is going outward, accelerating until it reach the maximum, and then start to circle. And this is what creates the shape or the pattern known as the circumpunct. The circumpunct in alchemy is the symbol of God, and is the symbol of gold also. It's something that is infinite, it's never tarnished, it represents basically the underlying idea. So this first division is the biggest division, but also is the smallest. If you go in the Planck scale, all these small parts, which they call it corpuscles, they have the same geometry. They have point of potential and a spatial sphere around. So the bigger the potential at the center, the bigger the diameter of the spatial sphere it will be around. So this is the first division, and then continue to divide into 2 pieces and 4 pieces, 8 pieces. It is very similar to what we have in our biology. We call it mitosis. Our cells divide in a similar way. In astronomy, we see the stars and the galaxies. In mathematics or the sacred geometry, we see the Vasica Pisces, and then the flower of light, the seed of life, and so on. So basically those circles, they are like spheres, and each of them have a potential point and a spatial sphere. All right. So this division begin and continue until unimaginable small pieces. They call it corpuscles. Those corpuscles, they could be like a Planck scale, very, very small, but they're all interconnected. There is no empty space. Each piece is part of something bigger, and those bigger parts, they call it an overtones. If the parts are smaller, then they call it the undertones. It's like in the music, they're subject to octave divisions in a sense. So the thing that is important here to understand is that all these divisions, they create something that they call alternating predominance, positive and negative. Each half, let's say, it will be slightly positive or slightly negatively charged. It will be more towards the space or more towards the time. So they create this kind of alternating predominance, and they illustrate here that our Native Americans, they knew this. This is their symbols for the, I think they call it ceremony wheel or something like that. So they were familiar with this kind of divisions and this kind of natural laws. And the other thing is Now in this image you can see that there are 4 corpuscles here, 2 positive and 2 negative, and this is very important image for us to know. But they say that there are 8 corpuscles in union. The other 4 are underneath, so the one that is underneath the positive is negative, and the one that is underneath the negative is positive. So they are always following this alternating predominance. And here they explain that this corpuscular field, these small spherical kind of entities, the signal, it's kind of replicated. It's not traveling, but it creates something like they call energy cascade. When those corpuscles expand and contract, they propagate the signal, in a sense, if I can say that. So when the signal enter and hit one of those corpuscles, it's exciting it makes it bigger, and when it exits the corpuscle is shrinking back, it makes it smaller, and this expansion and contraction, it's activating the adjacent corpuscles, and this creates something like an energy cascade through kind of resonance. But they expand and collapse, and they propagate the signal to move forward. They show here how this look like when the fields are compressed, in a sense, because these spheres sometimes they are subject to pressure, and they can take form of a cubical structure, or parallelepipeds, or something completely different from a sphere. It depends on how much is the external and the internal pressure. All the fruits to some degree also represent this corpuscular nature. They have different wedges, different sections, and this is something that is important. So in this image you can see this is a prototype that Bashar also gave us about anti-gravity. There is a copper disc inside. These black sections are non-conductive material, plastic, and the disc is conductive. So when we're talking about time field predominant or potential energy, we're usually talking about something that is conductive. We're talking about current flow and something that is conductive. When we're talking about the space field, we're talking about isolation, materials that are not conducting electricity, but the opposite. So in our conductors, we have a copper wire, and outside we wrap it with isolation. So the isolation is the space field, in a sense, which give definition of the time field inside. So the conductive current can move much easily when it's wrapped with isolation. And in the same way, this space and time field can complement each other. So when we have a vector of a time field or potential energy, these vectors is always wrapped around a space field, which serve like an isolation and does not allow to mix with other, let's go back here, with other flux lines. In the magnet here, we have millions of time field lines, potential lines that are going, but each of them is wrapped around a spiral of a S field, which is moving in the opposite direction, and this spiral can allow that vector of a time field to be distinguished, to be by itself and not to mix with the other lines, to keep it separate. So this is how they actually give birth and definition. So here they explain that when the second division split into 2 halves, each half have point of potential inside, and one of them is always a slightly different predominant, S, which is space field, or T, which is time field. So when this happens, they also, chemical manual, they share that within this kind of spherical energy entities that happens, these corpuscles that they call, always there is a central axis X here passing from top to bottom, and perpendicular to this there are another 2 axes, secondary axis Y and Z. They're perpendicular to the main central axis and also perpendicular to each other. And this is very important. Those axes are the primary and the secondary axis are very, very important for us and you will see in a bit how they are used in the devices that Bashar described. So axial agreement, this is kind of different definitions. Axes constitute a working agreement between equal and opposite halves of the whole entity. So when we have two hemispheres, one is space field predominant, more spiritual, let's say, less dense, and the other is time field predominant, more conductive, more dense, more material, lower speed, lower frequency. They find an agreement and they creating this axis in the center, which they can balance themselves and find an agreement, and that's in this central axis. Now, definition and geometry. The primary axis, designated as axis X here in the middle, is a line defining a full diameter that passes directly to a center point of an energy sphere. It acts like an anchor of the sphere's potential energy. So it's anchoring the potential energy of the sphere. In other words, the potential energy can go either from the circumference towards the center or from the center towards the circumference. It serves like a highway for the potential energy or for the electrical current, in other words. Circuitry network, the primary axis combines with radii to form multiple meridian planes which act as avenues of complex energy circuitry. It's a little bit hard to elaborate because we didn't talk about meridian plates, what they are. But when we talk about radii, the radii are similar to the secondary axis, Y and Z. They connect the center point of an energy sphere to the circumference. That's why they go radii, from radius. That's why the name radii is from radius, because they describe the radius. So maybe I can go back to the slides later if I missed something. We have the same image here, and we have more definitions about this. Energy pathways. The current prefers to travel along this axis on the surface tension of the sphere. It serves as a major avenue of time field energy flow. Imagine current, which moves either towards the center point, contraction, or out from it, expansion. And you can see on that image here, they describe what is the system of energy renewal. So basically we have these points of potential, the spatial sphere. When it reaches the limits of its speed, the current begins to circle, and we have two 0 points, because we're dealing with 0 point energy. There are 2 0 points. One of them is at the center, and the other one is on the circumference. So the potential energy, it's traveling from the circumference towards the center to be stored here, like a storage, to be stored. And when it's stored at the center, at this potential point, which they call it 0 point, it's transformed into kinetic energy and begin to go outward. These arrows that is interrupted is showing the kinetic energy. So the potential energy, it's traveling towards the center. Here it's transformed into kinetic energy and then begin to accelerate outward until it reaches the limit of its speed, start to circle. Again, here is conversion from kinetic energy into potential, and it's going inward. And this cycle repeats again and again and again. It's similar to our lungs. When we breathe in and out, we expand and contract. Our heart is pumping the blood in a similar way. There are many different examples where we can see expansion and contraction, but the idea is this is creating the system of energy renewal, where the energy, the cycles complement each other. The contraction and expansion actually complement each other. So the other thing which is very important, we say that those divisions create undertones and overtones. They are subject to doubling, similar to the musical octaves. Each octave is twice bigger than the previous one, in the music. But the thing here is that when we have this overtone expansion, when the energy sphere begins to double. This doubling creates in the axial line, in the axis, it will manifest like a kind of how to say, like a frequency, like a timing. That's why Bashar called it a time axis, because these divisions will reflect on the time axis or the primary axis, and it will result with a different frequency, and that's why he called it time axis, from timing, from different frequency. Here in this image they show when we have different potential what's happened. So just pay attention for this C image. So when we have a higher potential here, we know that energy flow from higher to lower potential, it travels first to the fulcrum point, to the middle point C, not directly to B, but first to the fulcrum point, and then from the fulcrum point it's traveling to B. So this is the simple circuitry that they explain. It's similar thing happen here. So we have the potential energy, it's traveling towards the center, the fulcrum point. We say that the central axis is the fulcrum point of the energy octave, and then from that center point it's traveling back to the circumference. So it kind of the same activity, but here it's kind of linear and here is circular. It's circulating back and forth. Maybe it's not so easy, not so intuitive, but yeah, this is at least how I understand it. So what is important for us is that this is the flash matrix that Bashar is talking about, device that they use in the spacecraft to convert light, very high frequency, into usable energy. It's kind of capacitor, and they are 21 spirals in one direction, 34 in the other direction. It looks very similar like this because one of the spirals allow the energy to go out, let's say, and rotate this way, and then from the other spirals the energy can return back to the center. They call it with interest. In the chemical manual they say when energy accelerates, it's gaining momentum, inertia, and then when it returns with the interest. But the interesting point here is that two of those spirals that are 21 in number, they are connected like the axis Z, opposite each other, exactly opposite each other. The two from the 21 spirals are connected in this way, and the other 34 spirals, two of them from the 34 are connected perpendicular to them, exactly like axis Y. Bashar explained that this is very important. He explained that if you cannot drill the crystal, the quartz crystal, directly, we can connect them on top and the bottom, but we always need to pay attention that they need to be perpendicular to each other. So I believe that this perpendicular connection, it has to do something with the phase of them. And if you remember, when we saw on the first image, we have two positive opposite each other and two negative opposite each other. So basically, the two of those spirals, which are the negative, are space field predominant, so the energy will go out, and the other two perpendicular will be subject to potential energy, to time field, and they will contract, moving towards the center. So this device that Bashar described is in alignment with the chemical manual, with this image, with the previous images, when they explain this kind of alternating predominance. So it's absolutely in the same way these spirals are connected, like you see in this image. And the central axis, this is the copper rod, in this case is 5 millimeter, it's passing through the crystal, and these holes from the crystal, they act like an aperture, like vortices. And for those of you who are curious, in the chapter 5 they explain how the aperture relate to vortex, how the aperture can capture and accelerate, copy and paste the signal and enlarge the signal. especially if it's 0.8 millimeters in diameter. So the secondary axis Y and Z, where those spirals are connected, is perpendicular to the primary axis and defines the diameter to the center of the sphere. Okay, that's obvious. A third axis Z is perpendicular to both the primary and the secondary. Yeah, this is also very obvious. You can see from the image. So the equatorial plane together, the Y and Z axis, define the equatorial plane of a sphere. This is from the chemical manual. This plane is often identified with a feminine power because it replicates, magnifies, and sustains the energy. In other words, this is the definition of a vortex from chapter 5. They say the vortex have tremendous applications. It will always replicate, magnifies, and sustain the energy or the electrical signal. And they describe basically that the vortex is a kind of feminine aspect and it's a raw power. So, and they say also that the vortex have huge capacitance in the book. And these spirals are embedded between capacitor plates. On top and the bottom we have hemispherical capacitor plates, completing even more this kind of image that you can see here. You will see images in a while. So this is another very interesting idea from our chemical manual. All the images are from there. They describe the spider web. It's kind of vortex. So the spider web design is both metaphor and reality of cosmic construction, where an aperture fills itself with the patterns as field. It is also a form of creation of matter on the plane that adjoins two spheres of opposite predominance. So when we're talking about that there is space field predominant spheres and time field predominant spheres. So when they begin to merge together to find an agreement, in a sense, they create a common plane, and in that common plane, these spirals happening. You will see exactly how this is in the image. But the spirals or the vortex, they say that the spider web is like a vortex which attracts uncommitted energy. Different flies, different insects, if they're uncommitted, they can go there and serve as a food to the spider. In other words, the vortex attracts energy that is uncommitted and can sustain, nurture the one who creates the vortex in this case. So this is another spiral that it's a labyrinth symbol of the oldest known symbol in the world. This is in the Nazca Plateau, I think, as far as I remember. And the other idea where they share that those spirals are forming is exactly like in our case in the flash matrix inside the capacitor. So in the capacitor we have positive and negative plates, right? Conductive. And they say that the sphere between two electrical charge metal plates is filled with space field, with expansion, with kinetic energy, which is equal and opposite to the charge of the plates. So the more charge we have, the more potential we build, the more pressure of space field we create within. That's why sometimes we can pop out the capacitor if we charge it too much. If the potential is very big, it can explode. The pressure it will build inside, this space field, this expansion, it will build and it will destroy the capacitor. It takes the form of a sphere in overtone. There is also overtone sphere around each charged metal plate. So basically each plate have its own sphere, and two spheres they intersect and create the third identity. This is very similar when Dario Anka, time field predominant, more let's say material consciousness, it's connecting with an extraterrestrial, which is space field predominant, more spiritual, less dense, high vibe. And they create the third identity, the third sphere in between, which is Bashar. The third identity, which is spiral, which is information, which is energy, which is creativity. Something similar happened with a normal capacitor. So the three spheres together share a common central plane. On this plane, energy spirals in and out, like our Fibonacci spirals go in. There is a path to go in and path to go out as a result of an energy oscillation in the fields nearby. Any motion in this plane causes tori, which broadcast outward into the field at large, because this is a vortex, and the vortex is a dipole, and when you oscillate the dipole, you create an antenna. You can broadcast electromagnetic waves, basically. They say that every vortex is a dipole. The dipole, when oscillate, can emit information or energy which is modulated. So the capacitor is used in electronics because it holds and feeds back the energy. We know that. But Bashar explained that his capacitor, or what we call the flash matrix, it's building and releasing the charge millions of times per second. That's why it's a little bit different. It's like an AC capacitor. Okay, so the main idea here is that these spirals, this kind of spiraling formation, happen naturally between capacitor plates. And here there is another one illustration from the book when they give illustration when time field predominant sphere with space field predominant sphere begin to merge, begin to recognize themselves, like a female and male energy begin to recognize themselves and merge, they create this kind of spirals. So we have, this is the positive, time field is the positive charge, space field is negative, like it's like a capacitor again. And when the compressed field corpuscles seeks and find union within their equal and opposite corpuscles according to the coded impulse. Therefore, the spirals happen again here when we have this Vasica Pisces symbol, or two spheres from different predominance trying to merge together, trying to find union. So they call it the sacred union here. Spiraling action of creation within a Vasica Pisces of a sphere on the double plane of a chord. In other words, these spirals happen between positive and negative, between space field and time field predominant energy spheres, in the same way like in the capacitor. So this is our capacitor. We have a top hemisphere with a bottom made out of copper, a bottom hemisphere also have a flat bottom, and inside is the dielectric. It's very similar to this image, and inside of the dielectric you have these embedded spirals which allow the energy to go out from one set or to go in from the other set, to contract or to expand and create this kind of system of energy renewal which we saw earlier. And we have the central axis here, and we have the secondary axis, these four spirals that are connected perpendicular. So all of these, the main point here is all of these ideas that Bashar is talking about these devices, they are described in one way, shape or form inside the chemical manual, which is also channeled by extraterrestrial beings. And the other idea is that in a private session, Bashar explained that we need to connect conventional, normal electrolytic capacitors here on the rim. Positive on top, negative on the bottom. We need to start with 2 capacitors and slowly build up until maximum of 10 capacitors. And from here we siphon out the DC output. Alright. In one private session he say connect them all positive on top and all negative on the bottom, and the next private session he say next step is to invert every second capacitor. So if the first one it's positive on top, negative on the bottom, the second one to be vice versa, negative on top, positive on the bottom. So this is what he suggests. He say you need to invert every second capacitor. But because here we're working with high voltage AC, those capacitors, if they are polarized, if they are electrolytic capacitors, they will be destroyed in a second. They cannot handle high frequency, high voltage or high frequency with the same voltage rating, they cannot handle, because they're not designed to handle this change. And the only way to handle this is if we attach diodes to each leg of the capacitors, so this high frequency can be rectified, and for the positive lead of the capacitor, the diode can feed only positive charge from the positive cycle, from the positive phase, you know. And this, it's very interesting, because in each section which the diodes, let's say, draw the positive charge, it will leave most probably a wedge or section on the upper hemisphere that is a little bit more negatively charged, because the positive charge is taken away, and it will create most probably wedges of alternating predominance, very similar to this copper disc that Bashar talked about, anti-gravity device. Here we have conductive, non-conductive. I believe that those capacitors, they will create some kind of a dipoles and create some kind of sections of alternating polarity, like we saw earlier in the book. And these alternating polarities will be, in a sense, stimulating the flow or the rotation of the spiral. In other words, to put it in a different way, it will be like an axial flux engine, where we have north and south, you know, different poles in alternating predominance, and this is the rotor that it needs to rotate. But there is a problem here. Bashar explained that those spirals, they are in equilibrium. They cannot rotate because they are in a perfect balance. We need to find a way to disturb that perfect balance so the spiral can rotate. And last night, until 2 o'clock, I was thinking about that. So how we can make those spirals to rotate? If they're in equilibrium, we connect the capacitors with the diodes. Let's say we make this kind of wedges, positive and negative, eight sections, and positive and negative on the bottom, 8 sections. But this is not enough to rotate the spirals, because if the current is alternating and is changing phases, we have perfect symmetry here, and this perfect symmetry, it will not allow rotation. For rotation, we need to introduce asymmetry to shift phases, and this is what Nikola Tesla did before with his single-phase electromotor. In the single-phase electromotor, it's a very similar setup like this, but it cannot rotate. You need to either rotate the rotor manually to give initial rotation, which we cannot do here with the spirals. But Nikola Tesla, what he created, he add a capacitor between the poles, and he create the current and the voltage 90-degree phase difference. He shift them in such a way that he create a condition where the current is lagging behind the voltage, and he create let me see, maybe I can
single phase supply.
He create this kind of phenomenon when the current is lagging, it's 90-degree out of phase. And what this does, it allows when one pole is maximum charge, the other it's at 0, and then when the next is, you know, they follow, create timing between the poles. Not all of them are on and off at the same time, but they're taking turns. They're taking, one is first on, it's maximum power, the other is at 0, then the second is building up, the third one is going in 0, and this phase difference, it allows for the rotor to begin to rotate smoothly without initial without somebody taking the hand and rotating with his hand. This phase difference actually turn the electromotor with a single phase very smoothly. Once the rotor is turning, once everything is in motion, then this capacitor, you can be switch off or isolated. It needs only in the beginning of the phase. So the idea here, Bashar explained that when we connect these capacitors, positive on top, the first one negative on the bottom, and the second one vice versa, the negative on top and a positive on the bottom. To siphon out the DC current, we need to connect the positive lead of the first capacitor to the negative lead to the second capacitor. In other words, he didn't say you connect the first capacitor positive and negative leads and siphon there the current. No, he say connect the first positive lead to the capacitor, the next capacitor, the negative leads. In other words, to create kind of this kind of circuit. But in my opinion, we need, like Nikola Tesla, to add an AC capacitor in this kind of circuit. He say when you connect these positive and negative leads, then you can add LEDs, you can add potentiometers, you can add all the electrical components you believe that is necessary there. But this is between two adjacent capacitors. And in my opinion, we need kind of an AC capacitor which will create this phase shift or maybe phase difference that can allow maybe each pole to be charged and discharged in a specific timing to follow each other. And if you create it between the two adjacent poles, maybe the other poles will follow, and it will act like a cyclotron, if you are familiar with this device. In a sense, it will create acceleration inside, it will spin, actually the spirals will begin to spin inside. If we do not have this phase difference, they will buzz like the electromotor, they will vibrate, buzzing, but they will not rotate. They will heat, the current will be high, but they will not rotate. For the rotation, I believe that we need to connect an AC capacitor with specific capacitance rating that can allow this phase difference, phase shift, and allow the poles to take turns and actually the spirals to begin and to rotate. It's everything about timing. Bashar explained this many times to me and to other people. He say it's all about timing. So there is 1 minute video here about how this phase difference Nikola Tesla did it. Just to play it if you are interested.
Produces only one alternating magnetic field. That field cannot create rotation by itself. So the motor needs a phase shift to generate a rotating field. The capacitor provides that phase shift. It energizes an auxiliary winding out of phase with the main winding. This creates two magnetic fields slightly apart in time that start the rotation. Once the motor reaches speed, a centrifugal switch or relay disconnects the auxiliary winding. Only the main winding runs the motor. If the capacitor fails, the motor hums but does not start. It draws high current and can overheat. You can test a capacitor with a capacitance meter. Replace it with one having the same microfarad rating and voltage rating. Example: a fan motor with a 4 microfarad 450V capacitor will not start if you install a 2 microfarad capacitor. It will rotate slowly and overheat.
So basically, I believe that to rotate these spirals, we need to do something like Tesla did to create this kind of shift of the phases, and this can allow actually the magnetic field to move, to rotate, and the spirals can be finally activated. Because Bashar explained in the private session, they are in equilibrium, they cannot rotate. You need to find a way to destroy this equilibrium, and Tesla did that with a phase shift between the current and the voltage. So this was the insight last night I received about...
Could you not just ground it?
I don't know. To be honest, my electrical knowledge is not so deep enough to understand it.
If you could develop a true ground, the current would flow from the high to the low.
When I ground one of the leads of those capacitors, I have a lot more power and the current flows a lot. So anytime that but I don't know if my ground is hot. That's the point. I don't know if the ground is hot. So if we have an AC capacitor that creates phase shift, we can isolate the idea that maybe the ground is hot. Some people that's why. So this is, I have maybe the last slide here. I know that is a little bit too much today, but this is geometric definition. The straight paths, usually those radial paths that we mentioned that connect the center to the circumference, they are straight lines, they are like these axes, they are straight lines, they are not curved. So straight paths, radii, are straight paths that connect the center point of a sphere to its outer boundaries. But see here, look what's happened. Fluid nature and energy flow. The time field aspect, radii, are considered as elastic and contractive forces of the time field. So basically, they are like a conductive path through which the time field or the potential energy prefer to flow. They act as the primary conduit for energy, moving towards the center, contraction, or out from it, expansion. So just before I continue, imagine that we have a rotation here counterclockwise. On the outer rim, all the spirals are connected into a common ring. Around the crystal, they have another common ring, smaller one, which they are connected, except the 4 that are connected to the center. So if the vortex is rotating, in this case counterclockwise, it can enter through these 21 spirals and can contract, move inward, going inside the inner ring that they share, continue counterclockwise rotation, building momentum, building inertia, let's say, and then naturally it will exit from the other set of the spirals, which now begin to expand, which are 34 in this case, and will accelerate outward because as they expand, they gain bigger diameter, bigger length of each instance, and the energy kind of accelerate. And then when they go on the outer rim, they're going to continue counterclockwise direction. So the inner ring will rotate counterclockwise in this case, and the outer ring will rotate also counterclockwise. Even though the spirals look that they are counter-rotating, because one of them is going out and the other one is going in, they are actually moving in the same direction. They are counter-rotating, but remember that one is going out, the other is going in, and this kind of shift and make them compatible and share the same spin. They have compatible spin, they share the same direction of the spin. And this it will be just in one phase, when the current, let's say, is moving upward. But when the current moves in the other direction, everything will be the same, but in the opposite. They will begin clockwise direction, from one of them will go out, and from the other one will go in. So the main idea with these spirals is that they, even though they look counter-rotating, because one of them is going out, the other is going in, they actually have compatible spin. In each phase, they move in the same direction, either clockwise or counterclockwise. And the other thing is that they cross themselves further and further and further away as you go towards the circumference. And in the book, when they talk about networks, they say in each crossings, when lines or planes they're crossing, they create point of potential. And there are more crossings towards the center. So there are more points of potential building towards the center, which it's in alignment with the book again, that the higher potential is concentrated towards the center, and when we have potential difference, the current prefer to flow from higher potential to lower potential, so it will naturally seek to go from the center to the rim, because we have more concentration of crossings, more concentration of these points of potential that they're building. So the current naturally is like a passive circuit that will create higher potential in the center, and the current will start to naturally seek balance and to go out. And when it's going out, it will circle and naturally will flow from the other spiral. So this is very intelligent way, very smart way, very intelligent way to create compatible spins or two opposing forces of expansion and contraction that they complement each other, like an yin and yang. The more you go out, the more inertia and momentum you build, and then you invest that savings into concentration, into contraction. The more you go inside and you concentrate and you store that energy like a potential, the more you go from the other side of the spirals and you look to express that energy. into kinetic, into higher speeds. So this is very intelligent way nature, like the sunflower, it's creating these compatible yin and yang energies, pulling in and pulling out to complement each other. It's a very intelligent, it's very fascinating. So the radii typically exist as a straight paths, as we mentioned, between the center and the circumference of an energy sphere. They become curved or convoluted primarily when there is a spin differential between the center and the outer edge of an energy currents undergo dynamic shifts. This is a condition when from straight paths they become convoluted. Why they become spirals. Spin rate differentials, this is another reason. So radii do not curve unless the center of a sphere spins at a different rate. That is than the circumference. So when we have a different speed rates, this is irrotational vortex from the, let's say, the circumference and the center, they move with different speeds, then those radii are no longer straight, they become convoluted, they become like spirals. So here it's good to learn about rotational and irrotational vortices because they share different speeds dynamics between the circumference and the edge. But even if this is a rotational vortex like a flywheel, everything runs with the same RPM, let's say 1 revolution per minute, 1 RPM for a minute. But the bigger circumference for this 1 RPM will travel bigger distance because have bigger circumference, bigger length. So the speed here on the outside, it will be higher, and the speed on the inside will be lower. We have different speeds, and this is what maybe create the radii to be convoluted or spiraling, because we have, even in the regular rotational vortex, like in the flywheel, we have difference in speed. The outer edge rotate with the same RPM, but we have bigger circumference, bigger distance that travels. So it's equal acceleration, it equals bigger speed. And this is why they form. So of course, this is my assumptions. I may be right, may be wrong. I'm just throwing out this, and it's your choice to decide which things you agree or disagree. I'm not claiming that I'm right here about everything, just my thoughts. I'm sharing my thoughts here. So current changes in toroids. When energy currents within a toroid, a donut-shaped field, like we saw earlier, undergo change, the equatorial rings in the radial pattern moves in and out in the convoluted way. So let's break this down, what this means. If we run here to this central rod a DC current, which is a steady current flow, then these rings, the concentric rings about which we see earlier, the magnetic field will create concentric rings, and they will be steady. They will be concentric with perfect concentricity, and the radial paths will be straight from the center to the edge. But when we have an AC current, the AC current is building potential from zero to high potential slowly. So we have amplification that is building up. It's building slowly, and this creates, these concentric rings begin to form from the center, so they begin to look like spirals. But before they begin to look like concentric rings, the current shift, it moves in the opposite direction, and they need to begin to form again like spirals, but in the opposite way. So this is why when we have an AC current, it cannot create this steady concentric perfect ring with concentricity, but instead the AC create these spirals that move in the opposite direction, and which they have a convoluted radial paths, which they have convoluted shape, because it's shifting very fast. They do not have time to form this perfect ring with perfect concentricity. They begin to form, and before they complete the current change direction, they need to form from the zero again, from the beginning. So this is why they have also another reason, but they have spiraling form. And this image here on top left, it's very important image because it can actually review us how we create electrons, how we can create this electrical current. So this is a corpuscle, or a space-time field corpuscle, or one unit that the current or the signal is entering. When the current or the signal enter the corpuscle, or this kind of sphere, let's say, it's excited and it's expanding. And when the current goes out, the tori collapses and it's contracts. So again, we have here the idea of a pulse that is exciting when it's passing through. There is an expansion going on. So one set of the spirals will be activated, so the current will go out. And when the impulse ceases, it's kind of a vacuum that creates suction or closure, and then the other set of the spirals will be activated because the current will seek closure, it will seek contraction, and it will flow back inward. So this is how an AC impulse can create expansion and contraction on the equatorial plane of our device. And here is the magic trick. So what they say is, with the rising and falling tori, this space tori, space torus is a single, space tori is plural, many. So newly created particles may jump to next tori or may be released to space. So if you have this kind of contraction and expansion all the time, newly created particle, they refer here to electrons. I know that because in the chapter 2 they share. So the electrons are like a subatomic particles, not really particles but kind of vortices, but this is what they mean here. So when we have expansion and contraction, newly created electrons can be captured in space, and they can be captured from our hemispheres on top and the bottom because they are conductive. If they release in space, our hemispheres on top and the bottom from the spirals, they can capture this charge, these electrons, and through the diodes can feed it into the capacitors and create these wedges, these alternating polarity wedges. So these alternating polarity wedges, it may look like this copper disc because we have a negative here, positive here, negative here, positive here, and it will alternate in polarity like in our flash matrix if we connect the capacitors with diodes in that way, in alternating predominance. And this pattern, it's very interesting because when they talk about standing waves, how they form, they give this image. Maybe you can dive deeply again through the right hand rule, the space tori, circle around. You see the vector, your hand here, it's pulling the rope, so the rope in this way is going up. So the space tori through the right hand rule rotating counterclockwise, and this is what creates the pattern of a standing wave. And basically, if we arrange these capacitors in alternating polarity on the flash matrix, we may create something like a standing wave, and the standing wave can be activated with phase shift with AC capacitor and actually begin to rotate the spirals that are inside. When the spirals are rotating, most probably they create expansion and contraction, and they will enhance these wedges because more charge, more newly created particles, electrons will be created, captured from the capacitors, so they can complement each other in a sense, if that makes some sense. So when this expansion and contraction, this is not traveling again with the signal, this is created in instances, but when you put this in two-dimensional aspect, the time field motion, the time field circulation here, it can be captured from our oscilloscope, and basically we're reading like a sine wave. So this is the potential drop. The potential drop, it's like this image, and this is the potential rise, it's like this image. So basically the time field is rotating in this way, and this is what we measure when we use our oscilloscopes. So when we have high voltage, this means that this expansion is huge. The amplitude, this amplitude is huge. High voltage means that the space torus have a huge diameter, a big potential inside. Its equal and opposite create bigger diameter. All right. So when we have high voltages, when we're dealing with high voltages like Nikola Tesla, we're dealing with a huge potential at the center and huge circumference of the space torus. And when we're dealing with high frequency, the timing between them is very short. So these spherical entities are so compressed that they look like a pancake. They look flat. And they call them in the book magnetic dinner plates when they are so compressed that they're flattened, like discs, maybe like this image here. So they have certain, I'm not going to talk about this in this video, but they have certain abilities to hold the signal, the light signal, which is basically unstoppable, can pass through all the materials, but magnetic dinner plates and extreme heat can hold that signal for a certain period of time before it continues its passages, because the light signal is like a messenger. It's want to bring the message from the event, and it's passing through everything. So basically in these images you can see that the different components of the devices that Bashar is talking. This is a copper disc from the anti-gravity device, standing wave, the flash matrix. They have a lot of things in common, and we're just scratching the surface here, maybe 10% of what they have in common. If you read the chemical manual, and if you're familiar with more of how Bashar described those devices, you will find more and more, and every time I'm reading, I'm finding more and more correlations and parallels and so on and so forth. So here basically the idea is that we can introduce a phase shift between those main capacitors, eventually to introduce a flow or rotation of the electric wedges, different predominance, and this may be a crucial point, or maybe kind of crystal oscillators can be attached there to create better oscillation, better resonance, and there are so many things we can do with that. So if you have any questions, I know that it was a long presentation, a little bit heavy, or if you want me to go back or to elaborate on something, or if you have different idea, please let me know.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
In the copper rods that you mentioned at the beginning, they go on the space-time antenna, the cones.
Mm-hmm.
They go from the peak of the cones to approximately the middle of the cones. So there's two separate copper rods.
Yeah, this is a very good question, because because usually it's a single rod representing this central axis X, but Bashar's mention, I heard it, he says, of each of the cone, you add a copper spike in each of the cone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, which make me see that it could be like a dipole, but usually this central rod is a single piece. In a space-time antenna, the Merkaba inside is connected with top and bottom copper rods, which represent this axis. They are not separated with the dielectric. It's connected to the main circuit, to the Merkaba.
If I could,
yeah,
as a bit of a thought experiment, this is what I've been pondering the last few days,
yeah,
is if you imagine a cone in your one hand coming out, and
yeah,
then another cone in your other hand coming the other way. And then if your hands are the energy and you pressed it at the wide base end of the cones, it's almost like a big capacitor. There would be less pressure, but less speed as you pressed in. But as you got to the points of the cone, the energy would be speeding up tremendously. And then it would zoom out to the other base of the other cone. And so I've been doing this as a thought experiment where there's a pattern, and you can either push one hand in and let it go, or you can push the other hand in and let it go, or you can press both together. But I've worked it through in my mind, and Bashar clearly says that the space-time antenna works on an etheric energy that it brings in,
Yes.
and it's a magnetic etheric energy. So on my cones, I was redesigning it because, as you know, if you add charge to a wire, it will create uh, a space field in the opposite direction of the current flow, and it'll create a slight magnetic field, but not that much. As an example, if you take a cylinder and wind it, and you put charge to it, current through it, there's a very small magnetic field generated. But if you put a ferrite core in it, the magnetic field is increased by 1,000 times.
Yes, the inductance is huge. It's much bigger.
Yeah, so I took off my other reply off the website simply because it's obsolete. And what I'm changing it up now is to, instead of using the copper wire, I'm going to go to this, which is a 1/4 inch copper tubing, and it's hollow. And it gives me the option to slip in a soft iron wire through the windings to increase the magnetic field.
Yes,
Uh,
but this
this
will
is my
lower
way of,
the frequency, right? It will
it'll lower
massively.
the frequency because the cones themselves, I went through all this in my mind, and I'm going to build the cone at 1 meter tall on the slant.
1 meter tall, yes.
Sorry, 1 meter tall, but it leaves it approximately 30. I know you don't like to use inches, but slightly shorter on the slant. And the reason being is that 1 meter is 1/8 millionth of the speed of light. And at that height, you're catching approximately eight, I believe it's 8 hertz, which is very close to the Schumann resonance, right? So the idea is, I'm thinking, is to tune the cone close to the Schumann resonance, and then have it amplify that either as it would be a sub, I don't know what, a subharmonic of that. So
And
that's why I was targeting the 1 meter height.
what,
So
what
I'm,
about you? What about using two different frequency at the same time, like one high frequency and one low frequency, like to be subharmonic of that?
uh, I don't know yet. I'm thinking,
Bashar explained that pi 3.14 can be used like a carrier wave when we're
yes,
dealing with a high frequency of 333 kilohertz or higher. We can use this kind of low frequency that can carry and stabilize in a very similar way that they have in their planet, this kind of three artificial intelligent moons that orbit their Ssani civilization. They have Epiphany, Epsilon, and Eclipse. It's their name. And he explained that they emit kind of a frequency. One of them is 200 hertz, that it's a lambda, and the other one is half hertz, which is epsilon. But they overlap both and they carry each other. So the lower
yeah.
frequency can stabilize the higher, and the higher can be carried and be more, in a sense, integrated. So
Well,
maybe we can experiment with two different.
there's several different types of energy related to this cone, and one is, radio frequencies. The
Mhm,
other is electromagnetic frequencies, EMF, and then there's magnetic energies, and then there's the actual electric current running through the cable or wire.
mhm,
And the way I see this, if you just use electric current, you're not going to get any very, very little magnetic field. And I think the magnetic field, again, going back to that experiment in your mind, if you think about pressing that current back and forth,
mhm,
when the current hits the cone area, it's going to dramatically speed up. it's going to, at that point, because the time field is moving in the other direction, the space field is moving in the other direction towards the wide end, it's going to create a harmonic between the space and the time
Well,
field, which is,
yeah, we have to experiment with this and see, because we can assume, but it's the best thing if you can experiment and see, because when we put the hands on, it will show
yeah,
if it will produce a result. And did this last few days, this toroidal coil. Some people say it's not going to work, but I did it anyway because I just wanted to prove that it's not going to work, so I can
yeah,
scratch that and can eliminate that. And yeah, there is another one thing that I want to share with you. Another one, coils that can be used in the equatorial plane, because these Fibonacci spirals, I believe that they can be used in the cones of the equatorial plane with the central rod and the crystal and so on. But to do that, the cones, they need to be bigger than what I did so far. They need to be with at least 60 centimeters base, so the equatorial plane can be 30 centimeters, and this allow to make the Fibonacci spirals much easier
uh,
without.
that's big. That's a big cone.
Yeah, that's a very big cone. But I want to share something here because I have on Inkscape. Nikola Tesla, he experimented with bifilar coils. Um, Let me see if I can share a portion of the screen like this, maybe. Can you see it now? Can you
Not
see
yet.
my screen? Yeah. Okay, so basically what we have here, what makes me think that way, when we are doing the cones, we have the Fibonacci ratio between the height and the base. So the height of those cones, it's 1.618 times bigger than the base, right?
Yes.
If the base is 21 units, the height is 34 units. This is a golden phi ratio. But when we're talking about the flash matrix, we again have the phi ratio, but now it's flat. It's expressed radially. Here it's expressed axially.
Yes.
Here it's horizontal. Here it's vertical. The phi ratio. So both of them, they have in common the phi ratio, but here is axially, here is radially. And there is another cone that also it's a phi ratio, but it's opposite. The base, it's bigger than the height, which is the Great Pyramid in Giza. All right. So, but there is something else. So this is what makes me think that the spirals of Fibonacci can be compatible with the cones, because basically they have the same properties. The one is radial, the other is axial. Here we have a crop circle, which symbolizes a transition, and I create kind of coil, but maybe it's good to, let me see if I can destroy the groupings. So basically this is one spiral, 1 second, and it's exactly like our Fibonacci spirals, but instead of expanding with the golden proportion, they are kind of logarithmic spirals. They have, normal expansion, So both of them, they expand from the center out. And the black one, it's the opposite. They contract from the edge towards the center.
Yes.
If we create such a coil, and if we connect it to the central rod, then what happens is we create then the spirals, the red spirals, which expand out. When they reach the circumference, the current can enter the black spirals and can continue to contract inward. You see, if from the red spirals here, let me put it like this. Imagine that from the central rod, the current now, it's moving towards your face, and the magnetic field is moving counterclockwise, so it's expanding out, it's expanding, and when it reaches the circumference, then it will wonder what to do, but we can provide a pathway to follow, to keep the same rotation counterclockwise, but now to contract. So basically with this kind of spirals can create expansion and contraction very similar to the Fibonacci spirals, but much more easier for you if you want to construct it at home and to experiment, like we shall explain, fun home experiment. Now, when you take these Fibonacci, when you take these normal logarithmic spirals and you increase the density, you make them more loops, more windings, then you have this kind of image. And in this image, you can see how they form naturally the pattern of the secondary axis that they describe in the book. You see they have 90 degree out of phase. In a similar way, here they are different. Here you can see also the different.
Can I interrupt real quickly?
Yeah, sure.
I am using my mobile phone, so my screen is small. But are you sharing a different? Are you sharing something else?
This is by something else. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, do you have another screen or another monitor that you are showing something on? I'm not sure if I'm looking at what you're talking about.
You're not showing up. Whatever you're not sharing your
Yeah.
screen.
You're
Oh,
sharing
really?
you're sharing a screen, but what you're talking about, I don't seem to see what you're referring to.
So when I speak, you don't see the images. What I'm talking about?
So I see what you share right now. You're sharing a PowerPoint presentation on
Oh
docs.google.com.
no, no, no,
But
no.
yeah, but what I hear you talking about doesn't appear to be on
Ah,
this
oh,
tab.
thank you for saying that because
Yeah, no problem.
let me see, because I'm using the Inkscape. So that's a very good thing that you said it. Because I was using Inkscape, I was sharing different ideas, but maybe technically you were seeing the PowerPoint most probably, right?
Yes, I was
This
seeing the PowerPoint tab on
oh
your
that's
browser.
that's very good. So can you see it right now?
I see it rendering. Yes, I do.
Okay, so basically what I was talking about is that the cones, they follow the Fibonacci proportion in this way, vertically, but the Fibonacci spirals are also following the Golden proportion, but radially or horizontally. They are just the same idea expressed either in vertical or horizontal manner. So this is the crop circles mentioned before that represent transition, and this is the pattern that when you take this kind of coil starting to expand from the center outward, this is like a bifilar coil, when it reaches the circumference here, if you put it together with another coil, then it can enter the black coil and begin the contraction. So it is kind of an idea like Nikola Tesla explored with a bifilar coil, but this is quadrifilar coil. So if you connect them to the central rod or to the central axis, and the current in this central axis, it's following from your eyes towards the screen, then the magnetic field will follow, counterclockwise, and you will have this kind of pattern which resemble the crop circle. But if you increase the density of that, make it more loops, then you will end up with this is just a single spiral, but when you attach both of them, one in one direction and the other, you will see this kind of image. And in this kind of image you can see this secondary axis perpendicular and other radial paths begin to form. Even though you're working with convoluted spiraling shape, when you combine them together, they create these straight radial paths that the book explained that connect the circumference to the center point. You see? So this pattern of kind of resonances happen naturally when we are working with this kind of maybe quadrifilar coil. That, I believe it's much more easier. This is what Tesla was exploring. but it's very different because there is no central rod, no central axis here. So I believe that this is much easier for somebody to create at home if he wants to create a coil, maybe with high frequency, lower capacitance, and maybe on top and the bottom of that we can use capacitor plates to capture, if anything, it's created like a like a positive, like a charge, like electric field, like a potential difference. If they create new electrons, in the same way we can use this instead of using the Fibonacci spirals, most probably, to create similar effect, but they are much more easier to build for some of you who wants to to experiment. So I already create one. It's a little bit ugly. I will share it in the community. It's working. I mean, it's not so bad, but I'm looking for a better way to create and then share with you how you can do it. But this is very interesting because you can see, let me see if I can break it down. You can see that, you see one of them, it's moving, it's expanding, let's say, let's assume that it's expanding from the center, and the other one, it's contracting towards the center, the black. And when you put them together, you can see those radial patterns that are 90 degrees out of phase, that in the book they call them radii. So this is very interesting finding. And here are separate vortices of 34 and 21. When you put them together, you have this kind of pattern. These spirals, if you use liquid or hydraulics, we're going to make another video to see how this is going to behave, because we can use the Bernoulli principles. We can create different static pressure or dynamic pressure gradients, and this can create some kind of vortex, like with like in the tornado, with low pressure core, and create suction in a sense towards the center and act like a pump or like a turbine. It can act if you use a liquid, if you use it like a hydrostatic or hydrodynamic idea. So yeah, let me just stop this. Thank you for telling me that. It was very important.
Is there a repository on the website?
Yeah.
Put papers of different experiments that we've done and the results that we've had to help other people. So
yes, there is a kind of libraries that have some information there from Bashar and only.
I saw like some videos, but is there a place where we could put papers documenting what we've done and the results that we've achieved for others? Is either starting points for others or for more information for people to take off from?
Basically, this community have like a classrooms dedicated for different topics, different ideas, and in this classroom so far I can post only myself like an admin. But if you want to share your findings and your experiments, you can do that on the main feed. In the main feed, many people share already different ideas, different contributions. And yes, if you want to share something, you can do it on the main feed of the community inside. You can add files, videos, files, and different, you can do that on the main feed. Not in
you
the
can do you can add like a PDF file documenting.
Yes, anything, any kind of file, documents, videos, polls, anything you can imagine, you can add inside.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I think Dean may have been asking this exact same question, but I'm not sure if I got the answer. So regarding the school application and website or portal, is that what you're referring to as far as accessing the historical
Yes.
information. Okay, and then also, where would we go to see like the current status of like your project or projects? Because I'm still getting familiar with the application itself, and I've been using it on my phone, so maybe there's limitations there.
Yeah, on the laptop it's better, but yes,
Okay.
on the school, if you want to suggest an experiment or maybe see something specific, or we can communicate there, and I will be more than glad to, you know, to collaborate in this way. But yeah, this is better in school because there is a main
Hmm.
feed where communication can go, and sometimes I can add something in the classrooms. There is
Okay.
scientific library or metaphysical library or other parts.
Hmm.
um, yeah, I can split and I can organize the information in that way. But usually when I make some casual experiments, some I put them in the main feed so people can see. And
Okay. So it's Dean may have asked this exact question, but is so if I can find the current status of your of this project and the files through the school application.
yeah, you can find
Okay.
a lot of things there. But if something is not there, you can always ask, and I can provide if it's possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, all right. So this is basically the main idea. We know that there are a lot of parallels from what Bashar explained, from what this extraterrestrial civilization in the chemical manual explained. There's a lot of cross connections and confirmations. And when I spoke with Bashar and described this space torus that we mentioned earlier, I begin to describe the equatorial plane, the circuit loops, the central axis, and so on and so forth. And he say, what you describe right now, it's the matrix of the electron. Um, and the electron is like a vortex, he says, and you're describing the matrix actually of the electron. And he says another thing, that you don't need to go into the nucleus, you don't need nuclear power to dismantle the nucleus in order to get a lot of energy. If you tap the electron only on the surface of the atoms, you can have enough clean energy or zero point energy. You don't need to go so deep to have enough energy in a clean way. You just have to know how to tap the electron. And the other thing he says, that this space torus, or this matrix of the electron, also it's the link to the anti-gravity idea. If you understand how this works, this dynamics, this field dynamics, we can also build an anti-gravity prototype. Um, and yeah, this was very interesting because I didn't know what is an electron. And then when I heard him say that, I check online and I find out that the electrons actually have this kind of spin, can be clockwise or counterclockwise, and so on. It was quite a lot of confirmations actually there with the space torus. Um, so that
Well, I would
was
also just add that the electron is what's moving, but the electron also produces several different forces that we're actually trying to harness. It's not the electron speed, it's the forces that they cause, as from my understanding.
yeah, yeah, most probably there's a lot of things about the same idea which we are not yet aware, which we're exploring. We using magnets to power our entire civilization, and yet we do not understand exactly how they attract and repel clearly, to some degree. Um, but yeah, most probably there is a lot more to the electrons that we know. Um, and
Yeah, electrons are influenced by consciousness. We've got
mhm,
empirical data and experiments documenting that from the 1900s. Just your thought process. Uh, when you think of them either spinning clockwise or counterclockwise, you can
mhm.
make them do that.
Yes, and the other thing, they also talk about in our chemical manual about this, that with our brain, we can use our brain in order to remember, because we know that, how to control the space field, and the space field actually it what moves the electrons. They explain also this how relate to the Faraday's law of induction, why he find out that the current is moving in the opposite way that he expected and he couldn't explain that. There is a lot of diagrams in a chemical manual that explain that, but they explain that the electrons is moved from the space field and we can direct and allow the space field to move in the preferred direction. If we remember, this is inherent in our DNA. And also Bashar is talking about that our energy fields are in a sense kind of an electron cloud. If you have more energy, there are kind of more electrons in your aura, if you wish, and this is also, Bashar explained that they relate to our personal energy, the electrons. So yeah, there is I'm sure that there is a lot of confirmation, there is a lot of cross connection. If you want, if any of you have any kind of an insight or anything he wants to share, I want to give you a space and feel free. Maybe if you work in a similar project, or maybe you have a suggestion what to experiment next. But to be honest, these cones, in order to put the flash matrix inside, these spirals, those spirals, if you build them smaller than 30 centimeters in diameter, then the crystal, the quartz crystal, need to be smaller. If it's smaller, it's very hard to drill because it can break. There is a bunch of different challenges that come through if you shrink the flash matrix lower than 30 centimeters. If you keep it 30 centimeters in diameter and fit it in the equatorial plane of the cones, this means that the cones have to be with 60 centimeters base. And if you multiply 60 by phi ratio, it's maybe about 1 meter. I'm not sure exactly, but it will be a pretty big construction. So it's a little bit challenging. With all the devices, it's a very tight tolerance. It's very hard to make. Bashar explained that this quartz crystal, if you put it a little bit above or below the equatorial plane, this will create a feedback loop that will cancel the energy, and it won't work. And yeah, it's a very tricky and tight tolerance.
You might have already explained this, but how did you create that quartz sphere?
That quartz sphere. I didn't create it. I purchased it from China. There are companies that they are working many years with quartz, and even for them it's very hard to drill that because they use ultrasonic kind of transducers in order to penetrate it. Drills, lathes, I'm not sure, but the central hole is 5 or 6 millimeters in diameter, and the 4 holes perpendicular are about 1.2 millimeters, because the spiral's wire is 1 millimeter thick. So imagine that the central rod needs to have 4 holes 1 millimeter in diameter that are perpendicular to each other, and they need to fit in the same way like the quartz crystal. So if they drill the quartz crystal slightly offset, slightly wrong, and you drill your central rod perfect, you cannot fit the wires inside. I mean, it's a really tight tolerance. And yeah, it's from China. It's the company is called Eldemon, and
Now, do you have all that documented on your website? Did you write a paper on that at all?
No. That's maybe one of my weaknesses, that I'm not very good at documenting stuff. I'm a little bit random, but I can provide, if people ask me and they say, hey, I want to have this quartz crystal or another components that you built your device from, where did you get it? I can provide you with all the information absolutely for free. I did that a few days ago with one guy. So
yeah, that's my point. If we can going forward, if any of us do decide
Yeah.
to recreate any of these,
Yes.
I
Yes.
encourage
Yes.
you just to write everything down, just for a starting point for other people, because
Yes.
there's
Yes.
more people are going to start joining here shortly, and
Yes.
there
So
are
if
other groups. There are also other groups like this,
Mhm.
but we need to. This is our group to
Yeah.
continue on and collaborate and corroborate with each other, and we can move forward more expeditiously and exponentially with our
Absolutely, absolutely. But
creation.
we keep in touch, and I will do my best to list this kind of suppliers, and explain, for example, the big space-time antenna, the second and the third big shells, the big hemispheres that they are made with metal, uh, hydroforming, when they put water inside under big pressure and they bend the shells and then they polish them. But the inner sphere and of the space-time antenna, and also the flash matrix hemispheres, they are made with different technology, with metal spinning, because they need to have perfect concentricity. And this perfect concentricity is very important, because when you solder the bottoms of the hemispheres, you need perfect alignment, your copper disc to be the same diameter, to have perfect concentricity, then you can solder it much easier. Otherwise it's impossible. I tried this already several times. um, if in China they use metal forming to create your flash matrix hemisphere, and they solder it with their welders there, this maybe it won't be even, the bottoms they won't be flat, and it will have some problems again. So that there are tricks and tips. Maybe I won't be able everything to share, but if I miss something, or if you have questions, you can always feel free, and I will do my best to assist you and share everything I know. For example, the metal spinning hemispheres, you need to find a company that they have a tooling to create them, because if they don't have tooling, then the tooling cost, it's several thousand euro only just to have tooling for that size. If they have tooling, then you pay only for the product, which is affordable, which is easy. So I checked many companies, and one in Netherlands had tooling, so we order from there metal spinning hemispheres for the devices. Um, but yeah, this is basically.
Well,
If
and thank you for what you're doing and what you've done. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
it's
what you're doing is great. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I second that too. This has been wonderful to jump into. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It's something that I start like a DIY project. I didn't think too much. Was just excited to make these cones and see what's going to happen, and sponsor it with my own money. It was a hard time for me at that point financially, because it was COVID, and um, I didn't work. But later on, because the excitement builds up, an investor kind of came, not investor, but a person who wants to find a project out of good heart, and because of his help, actually, because he invest money in this, which I didn't have, we were able to afford private session with Bashar, which were very expensive, like $400-500 per hour. uh, 4 or 5 sessions we had, and because of that, and because of other people also like you share this kind of information with me. For example, the flash matrix, one person online, he shared the image, he shared a little bit of information, and then we start to ask Bashar, and we extract more information. We understand actually how this thing works, how this thing has to be built. um, but yeah, we kind of collaborate. This is the main point. If we do it right, if we find a way to collaborate and communicate clearly, openly, then we can have like this kind of um, spirals, create constructive interference, build up potential, build up awareness, understanding, and eventually the truth, it will come on the surface much easier. We can finalize the project. It's very hard for somebody to do this alone. It's actually impossible, I believe.
Yeah, I was thinking like the question the gentleman asked earlier about the resources or your the companies that you've referenced. If you have time at some point, or perhaps you already do, maybe a Google Drive or some sort of folder where folks can access that if that's not already posted.
Yeah,
You know,
that, that
when you're able.
that's for sure. Maybe not Google Drive, because in the school community, we can upload any kind of files.
Okay,
And
great.
some of the suppliers, they are very versatile. They can
Mm-hmm.
make for you most of the parts that you need.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there is a company in China. They can build the big hemispheres. They build up.
Mm-hmm.
They create laser cutting the triangles of the Merkaba. They did many other also elements or components from the same company.
Mm-hmm.
But I found actually much easier, much cheaper other companies later on, because those triangles for the Merkaba, there are 32 triangles. They cost $17.
Mm.
You can find them now maybe for maybe 12, 13, maybe 11, depends. You can find it much cheaper.
One thought why I brought up Google Drive, because Google Docs, you have the ability to collaborate real time. I don't know how I imagine that could be helpful in some form. I don't know if the school website has the ability for real time collaboration document. Like you bring up a text file and folks can have access to it and edit it, or add information dynamically. I don't know if the website has that, and I don't know how, useful that may be to you at this time. But that's something to consider. Why I was mentioning like Google, like a Google Doc. If there's something that we can have the ability to add to it, like for example, you were mentioning you can upload a document to the school website, but can people edit that document?
No,
I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
something to consider. Maybe
Yeah.
not that necessary now, but
Yeah. Okay. I will have this in mind, because I'm not very familiar how this works. But there is another one, Zero Point Energy Group, that they're using this kind of share Google folders, and of course I can educate myself, and it won't be, because the suppliers, that there are not so many, maybe 4 or 5 suppliers.
mm-hmm.
And if it's only about the suppliers, maybe we don't need that. But we will see. We will follow the flow. If it's necessary, of course, I will educate myself. We can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But firstly, we'll share the suppliers maybe in the school community somewhere, and let you know. And if I miss something, if you're interested about something, some kind of details, you can always ask, and we can figure it out. The prices for those parts, they vary so much that it's insane. You can find one copper triangle for $45 each, and you can find it for $11 each. Or these hemispheres, they can be 10 times more expensive from different suppliers. It's insane how big price differences out there.
Hey guys, thanks a lot. I have to run. Thanks for the time, guys.
Yeah, we already hit 2 hours now in the meetings, and maybe we can miss the meditation for tonight, because it's already 9 o'clock here. But usually we finish with a sound meditation where we dive into our hearts and use it like an input to generate more energy with our bodies, because they are like transducers built with a phi ratio. But I'm not sure because tonight we already run into 2 hours long session. I prefer to keep them at 2 hours, no longer, concise every time. But maybe next time we can continue with the meditation, and for those of you who didn't experience, to have chance to dive in to experience it. Any final questions before we close the meeting? tonight, or statements if you want, if you wish. No, you're fine. Okay, all right. So we'll see you guys next week, and I really appreciate for your time, for your attention here. I learn a lot from you and from other people like you, even from YouTube comments, from the school community, from Facebook. Yesterday met one guy who's really good at math. He wrote a book, 300 pages, and it's full with formulas that I couldn't understand, but basically he find out the same kind of ideas that we're talking about here expressed mathematically, and it's pretty exciting to see how different pieces of the puzzle, completely different people sharing the same idea from different perspective. This is our strength, to collaborate, to do this thing together, and finally eventually to make. I'm really happy if one of you wants to replicate those devices. If you want to make it, I will do my best to share all the suppliers, the best prices and everything what is possible if you want to replicate that. Files, if you need, I already have some files uploaded in the community. So yeah, thank you each and every one of you. I really appreciate your time, and I see you in the next Sunday. This recording will be uploaded on the school community. So
Okay, thank you again very much.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you, Dan. Thank you, Kale. Really appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.